I should have known that day would change everything, not just my future, not just my engagement, but the way I understood who I was. My name is Clara Whitman, and this is the story of how I discovered that the greatest tests come when no one is watching. It didn't begin with flowers, or a warm invitation, or even a polite note. It began with a summons. The email came one grey Tuesday morning, arriving from the account of a law firm so prestigious its name carried authority all by itself. The message was short, cold, impersonal, almost like a court order. Mr. Leonard Whitman requests the presence of his son, Christopher Whitman, and Ms. Clara Whitman, for a formal dinner at his private residence. Attendance required. I stared at the words until they blurred. Chris and I had been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and yet his father, a man who had once commanded the financial world like a general on the battlefield, had never acknowledged me. Leonard Whitman was a legend, and legends rarely appeared in daylight. 10 years earlier, after building a multi-billion-dollar empire, he had vanished into seclusion at his fortress-like estate in Ravenwood Hills. Since then, only rumors remained. Some said he was gravely ill. Others claimed he had lost his mind. But the most persistent rumor was that he was impossibly, mercilessly difficult. Chris's reaction told me everything. He went pale the instant he saw the email. Usually calm to the point of smugness, he began pacing the apartment like a man awaiting execution. "Clara," he said, gripping my shoulders, "this isn't dinner. This is judgment." He doesn't meet people, he tests them. He tested my brother once, and when he didn't approve, he cut him off completely. Our entire future depends on this night. Our wedding, our home, my place in the company. Everything. His voice trembled with the weight of it. The following week was a masterclass in anxiety. Chris drew up rules, reciting them as though I were preparing for an interrogation. Do not speak of my non-profit work. His father considered charity a weakness. Do not mention my parents' modest background, it screamed unworthiness. Avoid politics, religion, gossip. Wear the navy dress Chris had chosen and, most importantly, the cashmere shawl he had bought. Appearances are everything, he warned. And above all, do not be late. He believes tardiness is a sign of a disordered mind. Every evening, Chris quizzed me on safe topics: art, history, economics, subjects Leonard admired. He begged me to keep my answers short, polite, and perfect. By the morning of the dinner, I felt less like a fiancé and more like an actress preparing for the most intimidating audition of her life. The train ride to Ravenwood Hills was quiet, the kind of silence that feels staged, as if even the birds have been silenced by money. Chris had already gone ahead to prepare. I was to follow and arrive in a taxi from the station. But when the train pulled into the immaculate little platform, my chest constricted. The pressure of the week, of the summons, of Chris's desperate eyes, all of it closed in. I needed to breathe. The estate was only a mile away. Against my better judgment, I decided to walk. Ravenwood Hills looked unreal, like a painting. Towering hedges guarded mansions from view, wrought iron gates gleamed with gold initials. Driveways stretched longer than entire city blocks. I felt like an intruder in a museum of privilege. I checked my watch, 25 minutes to spare. Enough time, I told myself. That's when I saw him. At the edge of a perfectly manicured park sat an old man, hunched on a bench. His coat was threadbare, his shoes little more than leather scraps. His face was carved with lines of hardship, his shoulders shaking faintly against the chill of the evening air. In this immaculate town, he looked like a smear across polished glass. My first instinct was to walk faster. Chris's voice echoed in my head, "Do not be late, do not get distracted." But then he lifted his head. His eyes, startlingly clear, blue as ice, met mine. They weren't dull or vacant, but sharp, intelligent, softened only by an unbearable loneliness. I froze. My heart pounded. Then my grandmother's words rose unbidden in my memory. "The measure of your character, my dear, is how you treat those who can do nothing for you." I hesitated, torn between fear of failure and the weight of compassion. Then I changed course and approached the bench. "Sir," I said softly, "are you all right?" His voice was low, rough, like gravel. "Just a bit cold." Missed the meal at the shelter today. I reached into my bag. I had packed a sandwich for myself, turkey, cheddar, whole wheat. My only food until morning. My stomach knotted as I considered giving it away, but my hand didn't stop. I held it out. Here. Please, take it. He blinked at me, then accepted it with a faint nod. Thank you, he whispered. I hesitated again. The cashmere shawl around my shoulders, soft, warm, absurdly expensive, was the one Chris had insisted I wear. It was supposed to signal wealth, belonging. But the man was trembling. Something inside me rebelled against the shallow rules I'd been drilled in. Carefully, I slipped it from my shoulders and draped it across his. You need this more than I do, I murmured. He looked down at the shawl, then up at me. His eyes glimmered with something unreadable, almost piercing. You are very kind, he said. I smiled, but panic surged. I checked my watch. 15 minutes left, and the estate was nearly a mile away. I bolted, my heels clattering against the immaculate pavement, my lungs burning. By the time I reached the Whitman gates, my chest was heaving. The wrought iron behemoths loomed over me, the golden W gleaming in the fading light. I pressed the intercom. My voice trembled. Clara Whitman, here for Mr. Leonard Whitman. A long pause, then the harsh buzz as the gates swung open. The driveway curved endlessly through towering oaks, each one older than my entire family line. At its end rose the mansion, a stone fortress with windows like watchful eyes. And at the top of the steps, waiting, was Chris. His expression was thunder. Where the hell have you been? He hissed, rushing down to grip my arm. You're 17 minutes late. 17. I told you, this is unforgivable. I'm sorry, I stammered, breathless. There was a man, on a bench, he was freezing, he hadn't eaten. A homeless man. Chris's voice cracked with horror. Clara, do you realize what you've done? You jeopardized everything for some vagrant. I flinched. He was hungry, Chris. I gave him my sandwich. I gave him the shawl. His eyes widened as they landed on my bare shoulders. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You gave it away. The cashmere shawl I bought for tonight. $700 gone. To a beggar. The fury in his face wasn't about me. It was fear, raw terror of a boy desperate for his father's approval. I almost shrank beneath it. Almost. But something inside me held firm. If kindness made me unsuitable, then maybe I didn't want to be suitable. The doors opened then. A butler, tall and skeletal in black and white, appeared. Mr. Whitman will see you now. Chris's grip tightened. Please, he whispered frantically. Smile. Don't mention the man. Don't mention the shawl. Just, be perfect. But as we entered the dining hall, perfection was already impossible. The room stretched like a cathedral, a chandelier glittering above, an impossibly long mahogany table running its length. And at its far end, seated like a king on his throne, was the man from the bench. Draped across his shoulders, unmistakable in its softness and sheen, was my shawl. My breath caught. My body froze. Chris tugged at my arm, still whispering frantic instructions, until his gaze followed mine. When he saw his father, his face drained of all color. His mouth opened, and a strangled sound escaped, half gasp, half whimper. The old man from the park, the billionaire recluse, the legend of Ravenwood Hills, Leonard Whitman, looked at me, and only me. His intelligent blue eyes glinted with quiet recognition. Then he spoke, his voice raspy but steady, echoing down the length of the table. Welcome, Clara. Please, come closer. I felt my legs lock beneath me, as though my body refused to obey. The distance between the doorway and the far end of the table looked impossibly long, like a mile of polished mahogany separating me from reality itself. Chris's hand twitched nervously against mine, clammy and cold. Father, he stammered, his voice breaking into a higher register. What are you wearing? Are you unwell? But Leonard Whitman wasn't even looking at him. His eyes were fixed entirely on me, those sharp blue eyes softened by something that felt dangerously close to warmth. Please, Leonard said, his tone unhurried, commanding. Come sit by me, Clara. My mouth had gone dry. My heart thudded violently against my ribs. I wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but no words came. Instead, I nodded faintly, released Chris's trembling hand, and walked the length of the table. Every step echoed like a hammer strike in the cavernous silence. Leonard gestured to the chair at his right, the seat of honor. Chris followed behind me, stiff, pale, broken. He hesitated at the far end before sinking into a chair there, like a schoolboy sent to the back of the classroom. When I sat, Leonard inclined his head politely, as though we were meeting at a cafe and not under the weight of a family's empire. "I must apologize for my appearance earlier," he said lightly, adjusting the shawl still draped across his shoulders. "It's a habit of mine, eccentric perhaps, to remind myself what the world looks like from the outside. You see much more truth when people believe you are no one at all." I swallowed, my voice trembling. You were testing me?" Leonard's lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk. "I test everyone." The butler moved silently, setting plates before us, an elaborate appetizer of smoked salmon, caviar, and delicate greens. The silverware gleamed under the chandelier. Yet I barely noticed. My mind was still reeling from the revelation. Leonard took a measured bite, dabbed at his lips with a linen napkin, and then spoke again. "You see, Clara, wealth is an armor. It hides people, flatters them, makes them believe they are better than they are. I've spent a decade retreating behind walls of stone and silence, waiting for someone to show me something real." His gaze sharpened, pinning me in place. "And today, you did." Chris's fork clattered loudly against his plate, his composure unraveling. "You humiliated me." His voice cracked. "You staged this ridiculous charade to make me look like a fool." Leonard finally turned his gaze on his son. "No, Christopher. You did that yourself." His words cut cleanly, without malice, but with devastating precision. "You begged her to mask her compassion. You ordered her to wear symbols of wealth as though they mattered. You trembled at the thought of my judgment, while he gestured toward me with a faint smile, saw a human being in need and chose to act. That is the difference between the two of you." Chris's face flushed scarlet. His chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. He looked at me, at his father, then down at his untouched plate, shame burning through him. I should have pitied him. But part of me didn't. Part of me had grown tired of being trained, polished, sculpted into someone else's image. Tonight had stripped all that away. Leonard leaned closer to me, lowering his voice just enough for intimacy. "Tell me about your work, Clara. Not the version my son told you to hide. The real thing." I hesitated, then inhaled deeply. "I run programs at a non-profit in the city. We work with underprivileged families, help them with food, housing, job placement. It's not glamorous, but it matters." Leonard's eyes lit with interest. "And why does it matter to you?" "Because I grew up in a small house with parents who stretched every dollar," I admitted, my throat tightening. "They taught me that dignity doesn't come from money, but from kindness. From responsibility toward others." Leonard sat back, his expression softening, almost proud. "They sound like good people." Across the table, Chris flinched as though struck. Dinner unfolded like an interrogation cloaked in civility. Leonard asked about books I'd read, about moments in my childhood, about the garden I was helping to build in our community. He listened, not the distracted nodding of someone polite, but the intense focus of a man who cared deeply about the answers. With every question, my confidence grew, while Chris shrank further into himself, silent, sulking, invisible. When dessert arrived, a delicate crème brûlée, Leonard paused before speaking again. He touched the edge of the shawl draped across his shoulders, then carefully unwrapped it. Folding it with surprising gentleness, he handed it back to me. "This is yours. Thank you for lending it when I needed it most. It brought me warmth, more than you realize." My hands shook slightly as I accepted it, my chest tightening. "You're welcome," I whispered. Leonard rose to his feet then, tall and commanding despite his age. "Christopher," he said, his voice low, final, "you have a remarkable woman beside you. Do not make the mistake of underestimating her again. Your place in my company, in this family, is secured tonight not because of your merit, but because of hers. Remember that. The silence that followed was suffocating. Chris sat frozen, his eyes glossy with humiliation. I stared at my plate, my heart racing. Leonard excused himself, leaving us alone at the long table. The butler cleared dishes in silence. Chris didn't move. Finally, he pushed back his chair and rose, his shoulders sagging as though carrying a lifetime of defeat. The car ride back to our apartment was wordless. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. Streetlights passed in a blur. The silence between us grew louder with every mile. When we finally entered our small, familiar living room, Chris collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. His body trembled. And then, for the first time since I had known him, he broke. "I'm sorry," he choked, his voice ragged. "For tonight. For what I said to you on the steps. For trying to make you into someone you're not. I've spent my whole life chasing his approval, and all it's ever done is turn me into a coward." His shoulders shook as sobs tore through him. "I don't deserve you." I knelt in front of him, gently lifting his chin until his tear-streaked eyes met mine. "Chris," I said softly, "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest. Can you do that?" For a moment, he only stared. Then he nodded, broken but sincere. And in that fragile, vulnerable moment, I believed him. The weeks that followed were quiet, but different. Chris stopped trying to control me. He stopped hiding behind rules and appearances. He listened. He stumbled, faltered, apologized again, but he tried. And little by little, the desperate boy I had seen in Ravenwood Hills began to fade, replaced by someone humbler, gentler. 3 months later, we married. Not at a country club, not in a gilded hall, but in the garden of my parents' modest home. The air smelled of lilacs, the sun streamed through the trees, and laughter replaced formality. Leonard Whitman was there, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, yet draped proudly across his shoulders, like a badge of honor, was the same cashmere shawl. As I walked down the aisle, he smiled at me, not the terrifying patriarch, not the recluse of Ravenwood Hills, but simply my father-in-law. And at the end of that aisle stood Chris, steadier now, stronger, his eyes filled not with fear, but with something far more real. When I spoke my vows, I understood at last what Leonard had tried to show me. Worth is not measured by wealth or punctuality or appearances. It is measured in the kindness we choose when no one is watching. That was the only test that ever truly mattered.